Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you about my journey with chronic illness, what my life was like before I was sick, what actually happened and everything that I went through, and what my life is like now. So grab a tea and get comfortable and settle in for a nice chat. So back in 2010, I was living in Sydney and I was working for an investment bank, and I was enjoying life. The previous year, I had separated from my husband, a marriage of 14 years, and I was starting to feel a bit better and enjoy going out and all the things that Sydney had to offer. I was living in an apartment in Neutral Bay, which is on the lower North Shore of Sydney. And every day that I had to go to work, I would walk down to the ferry wharf and take this beautiful ferry that went around Kirribilli House into Circular Quay, and then I'd walk up from Circular Quay into the center of Sydney. And my life was full of social activities and fun. I had a posse of girls that I would hang out with, and we would go to bars and we would go away for long weekends. We'd head out to different events and music festivals and all kinds of galleries, and it was just a really nice time in my life. I was dating a little bit and it was all going pretty well. And then my apartment was due to be renovated, so I moved out of there and I moved in across the bay into Newtown, which is in the inner west of Sydney. And I moved into a house share with another woman, and she was a fantastic person. We had such a good time. She introduced me to a lot of her friends, and she'd have parties in the backyard, and we'd do pub crawls in Newtown, and it was just a really social time, and she was just so much fun to be around. My little cat Millie, she had been through such a transition as well, and I'd moved her out of that apartment into this place in Newtown, and it was a little cul-de-sac so she could hang around. She'd love to go and visit the neighbors, and we just really settled into that life there. And then at the very end of 2010, I got some sort of an infection. I just felt really flu-y. I felt like that for a few weeks, and I didn't know what was going on. And when I went back to work, I noticed that I wasn't quite myself. And one night I was just laying in bed and I felt this huge weight on my chest. It felt like a brick was sitting on my chest, and it was really frightening. And I ended up going down to RPH, which was just around the corner in Newtown. And they checked me out, and it turned out that I had pericarditis, which is inflammation of the lining around the heart. And there was no medication that they prescribed. They just said I had to rest and get better. I thought at the time that was just an isolated incident, but looking back, that was the beginning of things going wrong with my health. The following year, I felt quite run down, and I would often go to the doctor. I had pain in my calves that just wouldn't go away. And then I had some pain in my left shoulder, and the physio said I had bursitis, and that I was probably due to carrying heavy shopping bags. No, I still got on with life. I actually met someone at the beginning of 2011, and we were together for about 9 months, and that was a really fun time as well, and travel and fun things that we did together. But through that year, I was feeling worse and worse. I had digestive issues. I had sleep issues. I was working really hard. I was doing long hours at work, but I was enjoying my work. I was working on a large project, and it was exciting and it was interesting. And in 2012, I was traveling with my mother in Fiji, and I got a really bad tummy bug. And when I came back, I actually ended up going to see a naturopath, and I went on to an organic diet, and I reduced a lot of gluten out of my diet, and I went without dairy for a while and those sorts of things. Then I came to 2013, and I was really starting to feel unwell. My whole life was becoming more narrow. I didn't do anything but go to work, And on the weekends, all I could manage was to get my groceries. And the rest of the time, I was trying to look after my body because I had so much pain in my body. And I was starting to not cope. I went to a meditation group and I was going to yoga. I got a private yoga instructor and she was helping me as well. But I was just seemed to be getting worse and worse. And eventually I went back to the doctor and I realized then that she really couldn't help me. She said she didn't know what was wrong. All my blood tests were normal. I'd actually left my corporate job. I actually had a team of people that I looked after, about 8 developers. I was the team leader. I decided that maybe what I needed to do was reduce the amount of responsibility I had at work. And also I was interested in moving in a different way in my career. I'd been in IT for over 10 years and I was feeling like it was time to do something different. But as a transition, I took a contracting job working for the federal government, and I felt like if I had a contracting job, it would be a little bit less stress and something that I could manage and not have to do as long hours. During that time, my health was going down and my energy was getting lower and lower. And so I decided what I needed to do was to take a month off. I drove up to Byron Bay and I spent a month trying to rest. And one of the first things I noticed when I got to Byron Bay was that I didn't feel any better. I felt actually really shook up. And it was so bad that I actually felt like the whole world was shaking. And I was scared. I felt so unwell. But I stayed a month in Byron Bay, took it really easy, and then I came back to Sydney and went back to my job. Within a few days of being back at my job, I was in trouble. I couldn't focus on my work at all. My memory was terrible. I couldn't focus on the screen. I couldn't sit through meetings. I had terrible pain down the backs of my legs. So I actually had the WorkSafe person come in and look at my chair, and I switched chairs to try and fix it that way. And I just couldn't sit down because of the pain. And eventually, one day, I just had a meltdown at work. I was crying, and I remember calling my sister and saying to her, I can't do this anymore. I can't go on like this. I didn't really have a choice. I couldn't go to work anymore. In the meantime, when I had been in Byron Bay, I had met this lady who recommended that I see an integrative doctor. That's someone who is a trained medical doctor, but they also are aware of other integrative holistic practices. So they might use herbal medicines and they might use a range of alternative therapies as well. So before I had actually quit my job, I'd gone to see this person and she did some blood tests, and sure enough, some things came up. She said that my blood count wasn't normal and that I had some other issues that were other deficiencies. And she also did a test for Lyme disease. Now, I know that Lyme disease is quite a controversial thing in Australia, but I had actually been in Fiji the year before, so it is possible that I did pick it up there. But she sent my blood off to California, and I had what's called a Western blot test. And it actually came up as a weak positive. So she said to me at the time that I was really fortunate that results came up in my blood, that there were actually physical things that could prove that I wasn't well. And she diagnosed me with Lyme disease and chronic fatigue syndrome. And she put the claim in for my income protection, and I had to wait a few months for that to come through, but it did get approved. I was single at the time. I had no other supports. I'd used my savings up, and I was going to be totally reliant on this income protection to live. So I just made the hard decision to pack up and go home. So my sister came up from Melbourne and she packed me up, and I had to pack up my whole life. I moved in with another sister. I was sort of sandwiched in between two of her kids in this little open cubby, and I had this little barricade that gave me a little bit of privacy, and I stayed there for a few months waiting for my insurance claim to come through. My sister found me another integrative GP who I'm still with to this day, and he got me on different treatment. And I had a naturopath, I found a GP down here in Melbourne, and then I had this integrative specialist who specialized in helping people with chronic fatigue. And at that time, I became completely bedridden from head to toe. The symptoms that I had a lot of cognitive issues, I had memory issues, I had insomnia, I had a terrible headache, I had pain behind my eyes and through my face, and I had a really sore throat all the time. I had a really tight chest and chest pain and digestive issues. I couldn't eat all the foods that I used to eat, so I had to go organic, and a lot of changes to my diet that I could handle. I couldn't have any alcohol. I couldn't have any caffeine. I just couldn't tolerate any dairy. It was just an extreme change in my diet that had to happen. And then I had pain throughout my body. I had joint pain. I had muscular pain, and the pain was so severe that it would stop me from going to sleep, or it would wake me up in the night. My hair was falling out. It felt like my feet were like watermelons, and every step was agony. So I used to be awake until 6 in the morning most nights because I couldn't sleep through the night. I had this terrible thud going on, this sensation of my heart beating so loudly, and I realize now that that was probably an adrenal issue that was happening in my body. So there were many levels of issues with my body, and I couldn't think straight. I felt like I had this massive brain fog. It was like thinking through layers and layers and layers of liquid and gunk that was stuck in my head. I remember at one time I tried to look at a computer screen and my eyes would just roll off the screen. I couldn't look for more than a few seconds. So I needed help with everything, and it was great that I was able to live with family for a little while. And then my insurance came through and I moved out with another sister, and that's where I started to get myself well. I was actually bedridden for about 9 months, and I could only get up for maybe 1 or 2 hours a day. And sometimes I would try and take a few steps around the house, but I was very weak, very run down. But with all the herbal treatments that I was doing and the various protocols that my doctor put me on, I was starting to deal with whatever the infection was that was in my body that was likely driving this. Towards the end of 2014, I started to feel a little bit better, and I enrolled in piano lessons, and I was doing some music theory and really enjoying that. That brings us to the end of part 1. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to get updates for the next one. In part 2, I'll be talking about starting rehabilitation and a medical crisis that ended up with me in hospital having emergency surgery. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.